let's start our second lecture. I should admit that my favorite things to do is to present something after John has just presented his lecture on how to make presentations. Why? Because if I do it after John, right after John, I don't have any time to change slides. So I have to do with my current slides. And you have to do with my current slides. And today, I want to talk to you about our current project on how Excellence Initiative, University Excellence Initiative in Russia affects Russian universities. So how we all, basically, in Russia, research universities are affected by 5 top 100 projects. I know that many of you are interested in this topic because even in this audience, we had several presentations yesterday exactly on the same topic. So today, we're going to discuss how our life is affected by this Russian University Excellence Initiative. That's still a research in progress. Why is that? Because we just started it a couple of years ago, so it's a new one. And also because this initiative is also very young. It started in 2013. So we're still waiting for results, long-term results of this initiative. So I'm hoping that this project would last for several more years for us to learn real long-term consequences of this program. So what motivated us to think about that? Now, many countries believe it's sexy to have world-class universities. Everybody believes that to be a great country, you should have a great football team and several world-class universities. And actually, nobody knows really how to do both. How to make a good football team, which would for sure win any game, and how to build a university from the scratch or from existing one that would be a real research one, real world-class, and would enter a league. And in recent years, probably that started from the beginning of 80s, there were a lot of government initiatives in different countries, which we might call excellent initiatives that were aiming to create research universities or world-class universities in those countries. Actually, Jamil Salmi, he is one of the leading experts in those world-class universities, once trying to count how many initiatives were initiated in last years. And he calculated that for decade, from 1989 to 2015, there were many of them, actually almost 50. And if you look on the last decade, in almost every region of the world, there were this kind of initiatives, both for developing countries like China or Korea or Hong Kong, and also for developed ones. Even in North America, in Canada, there was an excellent initiative as well. Many countries like Saudi Arabia or Sweden or India or Japan, every country wanted to have world-class universities. What is common about all those initiatives that different countries trying to implement? First, it was usually launched by the Ministry of Education. Actually, there is no exceptions. Always it's run by the government and it's run through the ministry. In most of the cases, ministry uses their main national agency of research and universities to implement that. In some countries, some special offices are created, but it's anyway on the hostess of ministry. Also, it's always public funding. There is no significant private money which are used in those initiatives. That's normally government, and government pays for that. And in most of the cases, those initiatives are focused on public sector of the higher education, not private one. Probably there are 3 exceptions. They are all in Asia. It's Japan, Taiwan, and Korea, South Korea, in which some public funding and some effort of the government goes toward private sector to build private institutions of the world-class league. But in most of the cases, that's public sector. And it mostly focuses on research capacity. In most of the cases, people try to target research capacity, not teaching one of the university. So if you ask everybody what's important in a good university, everybody would answer that's research and teaching. But the experience of those initiatives actually demonstrates that nobody seriously cares about teaching. Everybody is saying blah, 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 teaching is important, let's teach better, but nobody actually invests money in that. So that's mostly focused on research. And success is often measured in rankings. So everybody believes that rankings are harmful. Everybody believes that and admits that rankings are stupid, both in methodology and how they are implemented, but everybody uses them. Why is that? Because it's very simple. It's a very simple aggregate measure to compare things which couldn't be compared otherwise. And it's very cheap. It's a very simple measure that's very cheap. We all know that our president, Vladimir Putin, in 2012 said that there should be at least 5 Russian universities in top 100 by 2020, but surprisingly, he is not the only president who said that. Some other presidents, including Chinese one or Japanese one, say basically the same. For example, in 2014, Shinzo Abe, current Japanese president, say basically the same thing in the same wording, that there should be at least 10 Japanese universities in the world top 100 by 2023. In some sense, that's even more ambitious than Russian quote. So many decision makers think alike. They invest money, and they want quick return, and they want to go up in rankings. And some anecdotal evidence demonstrates that to some extent that works. So if you look on the top 10 universities which made the quickest jump in rankings, you might also see that in all cases, those universities were in the countries where excellent initiatives were implemented. That doesn't mean there is any causality here. We are just saying that some universities which got huge extra financial benefit from the government were able to drop in rankings very quickly. Probably the famous one and the most successful one is Shanghai Jiaotong University in China, who was in 2005 in the beginning of the 5th 100, and he is now very close to the first 100. That's the biggest jump. Surprisingly, it's exactly Shanghai Jiaotong University who invented Shanghai Jiaotong International Ranking. And you might say that's because those Chinese guys, they invented ranking, which suits them best, etc. And you might consider them, for example, with Moscow State University ranking. We all know that recently Moscow State University said, okay, we want ranking which would take into account the pride and glory of Russian universities. And they created ranking, and MGU appeared on the 5th position just after Stanford and MIT. It's not what Chinese guys did. What Chinese guys did, they said, we don't care where Chinese universities are right now. We want rankings that would help us to move in the ranking that would be legitimate for all countries. And I know personally the guy who created this ranking. And they never had an ambition that all the world would focus on what they are doing. They just created a simple instrument for themselves. King Saud University is also a very good example of very quick jump in ranking. They also started in the 500 and jumped up very quickly. And many people are kind of blaming Saudi Arabia for buying intellectual resources. Because what they do, they bring people into the country, they pay them a lot, and actually they buy a lot of Nobel laureates. They pay them business class tickets for the whole family to go to United States or Europe whenever they want. And they put their affiliation on their papers, etc. But still, they were able to go up very quickly. Aix-Marseille University, they use a third strategy. They just combine several smaller universities and invested money in them. And big is beautiful. And in many rankings, the size is important. So the bigger you are, the better positions you get in rankings, etc. But here, for the first 10 universities, and it's the same for the second 10 universities, all those universities were in the country where this initiative was implemented, and they got a huge amount of money from the government. And here, what at some point French people decided to do, they said, okay, it's really hard for us to beat, say, MIT, Stanford, or Harvard. Let's think about how we can do that. Let's put all what we have in one venture. Let's create a gigantic university, which would be association or kind of combination of most of the écoles normales, because they're basically better than universities, and they're a real point of selection, excellence, and the best universities around Paris. And let's move them outside Paris, close to Paris, and let's call it Saklai University, and let this gigantic university to go up in ranking. Why? Because that's going to be huge. That's going to be bigger than MIT, Stanford, and all other universities. They're going to produce more research output. They're going to teach more students. They're going to have a lot of international students. And we French people are going to be on the first rankings very quickly. And even French government, we're discussing how to invest money on that. But the story is not, it doesn't have any end yet, but it's almost the end, because the problem was, you know what the problem was?
The accessibility of Saclay. The accessibility of Saclay, which is completely outside of Paris without transportation.
That's accessibility of this distant area, it's a minor problem. But the biggest problem was that the potential parts of this university didn't want to cooperate. Why Sorbonne, why Écoles Normales, etc., want to be in one pot and mixed up and boiled to get better results in ranking? They don't want. Of course, there is always an issue. There's still no campus, transportation costs, etc., attractiveness of living. But the problem was there were no incentives for important players to take part in that. Okay? But still, even if there are a lot of initiatives and a lot of programs across the country, nobody actually knows what is the real impact of those programs in the respective countries. Why is that? Because it's hard to measure. First, because university is multi-dimensional enterprise, and it's really hard to measure all kinds of results. And also, and that's as well is the Russian case, if you invest in some universities in the country, you also get a spillover effect in the whole country. That's why it's really hard to measure the results of the program which was launched. That's one. also, surprisingly, this problem didn't get any attention from academic community, economics academic community or sociology or sociological community. Most of people were interested in this topic were people in higher education. And they were interested to discuss like general ideas, but not to try to approach that by numbers. And there's still some papers which try to address that. There's a paper on their Brain 21 project of South Korea, which was one of the first excellence initiatives in Asia and in the world. And it demonstrates that there were a rise in publication activity for those universities. There is a moderate rise. And there are some papers which study China experience. We know that China had several consequence programs. And most of the paper, they all state there is a growth in publication activity. And there are some papers on German Excellence Initiative, which is a bit different from all other projects and all other initiatives because it supports not the whole universities, which most of the programs do, but they mostly support some initiatives or some centers within universities. That's a bit different. But still, there are some papers which discuss how this initiative influenced the whole German market, etc. So what we are trying to do, we are trying to look on the Russian case and try to understand what is the impact of Russian University Excellence Initiative on the research performance of Russian universities. What we should know about this program? I think that since most of us here are in some way victims of this program, we all more or less know how it works, but still I want to underline some important features of that. First, it was announced in 2012, but first launched in 2013, where first money were distributed to universities, and the winner were announced. And it was to improve the competitive position and visibility of group of leading Russian universities at the global academic market. What does this quote mean? It means we want you to go up in rankings. We're going to check how you go up in ranking and how fast you do that. And what's important about that? At that time, experts and advisors who advised Putin office to write down something about rankings, they didn't use themselves what the rankings are. They have heard there are university rankings, and some rankings are more important than others. So they suggested, let's put it this way, let's call it major global university rankings. They didn't realize there are several rankings with different ideas, with different methodology, and they conflict to each other. And some rankings are more harmful than others. And they also didn't take into account, for example, that there are university rankings and also subject rankings. For example, you might be, say, in top 200 as a university of whole, but your, say, physics department could be very good, and you can be on the position of 50, under 50 in the physics. So now some universities try to cheat or some try to negotiate, saying, did you really mean global rankings? You probably meant subject rankings. We are sure that you meant subject rankings. And what's the reaction from the government officials? Government officials are thinking, okay, we are sitting in the office and get our salary. And if those stupid universities don't improve their position in the ranking, we're in trouble. Why? Because that means that we use our money inefficiently and we're bad bureaucrats. So if they're saying, okay, let's look at the subject rankings, and Russia is doing better in subject rankings, let's say we like it. Because in this case, as a bureaucrats, we are considered as efficient ones. So that's a kind of double tricky game. But what's important here that at the first moment, 15 universities were appointed. Those universities applied for being accepted to the program. And in this program, two things were important for selecting those universities. First thing was current position of the university. But the second point was what promises universities were ready to do for the next 10 years, or 8 years, till 2020. So what's important is not how good university was at that point, but how ambitious she was in 8 years. So in this treatment group, and that's important, we have some universities that are not, say, that good at that moment, but their ambitious allowed them to enter in this program. Now, in 2015, 6 more universities were added to this group, and these universities are somewhat lower in quality, and the choice of those universities even more politically influenced than in the beginning. But what's important about rules of the game? Government provides funds, public funds, on the competitive basis. What does it mean? That every year, all those 15 and now 21 universities have to compete for the pie, how to divide the pie. And if you do badly in the current year, in the previous year, you can get a smaller pie. It's not like we promise you some pie and some pieces for the next few years. No. Every year, you had to prove that you are the best in the group. So, since it's done annually, there is a permanent monitoring of the short-term achievements, which means that every year, university, to be considered inefficient, should do better than in the previous year. HEC has a problem with that. Why is that? Because every year, we admit very good students. And the average United States examination score is above 80. Why is that? Because those people who are admitted through Olympiads, they get 100 score. So to calculate the average, they are taken as 100, right? So if you already have like 92 as an average, for the second year, you should do better. And for the third year, you should do even better. So last year, we had to write a report why we jumped down from 94 to 93. They said that's an efficient use of money because previous year you did better. We said, come on, we have some universities in the program which jumped from 75 to 80. They said, they work better than you because you jumped down. And that's the problem. Every year, you need to demonstrate that you're getting better and better continuously. There are several key indicators in this program. 2 of them are number of peer-reviewed publications and citations per capita, per one person. Okay? So to estimate the effect of this program on the research performance, what we should have. First, we have a treatment group. We take 14 universities which participate in this project. Why 14? Because we don't include HEC. We don't include HEC not because it's outlier and everything's that good in HEC and everything. No, we're quite below some other good universities in terms of performance. But that's because our HEC is not under hospice of the Ministry of Education. That's why some kinds of our reporting is a bit different from all other universities. That's why we exclude HEC. But if you include that, and we did that as an exercise, it doesn't change anything much. So that's 14 universities. Then the hardest problem was with a control group. As Alexei mentioned yesterday, there is no such a thing as a control group in Russia. Yes and no. Yes, because for treatment group, for this program, all good universities were selected. Basically, almost all universities were selected, except Moscow State and St. Petersburg State, but they're under special status with the government, so they're not included as well. So the problem is how to find a control group. But we believe that when we think about control group or the rest of the group, of the rest of the universities, in this way, we make very important subjective judgment about kind of academic quality of the universities, which not always correlate with formal indicators. So there's a huge surprise if you look on the formal indicators in terms of publication, teaching staff, faculty, etc. For some universities, you would see that they do better, or at least not substantially worse, than those treatment group universities. Of course, we all know that, for example, is there any people from Kazan? No. Or we all know that Kazan, for example, produces fake publications, and
It's been filmed.
Huh?
It's been filmed.
Did I send something? Okay. Some people saying that Kazan universities are producing fake publications, and that's very easy to see because we're going to have lecture on public procurement, say tomorrow, right? Procurement is amazing tool to study what university are doing. You know why? Because if university wants to buy anything, she needs to go to a public procurement website and post an announcement, I want to buy that. That's why some universities, when buying publications, they also do it through public procurement procedures. Can you imagine that? My colleagues did exactly this kind of research. They went through the public procurement website and found some announcement that we want to say spend 3 million to buy, say, 20 publications with affiliation of this university, name of the university, and we want those publications to be in quartile Q1, Q2. We don't make it public. We don't make it public just because otherwise people would be saying it's HEC hates us and wants us out of, Worldclass league. We say, okay, we'll wait what academic market would say about that. But that's important that if you look on the formal indicator, you can actually find control group universities. And we selected 13 universities using three variables for that. First, we try to find universities which are comparable to our treatment group in terms of number of publications. Also, we check that those universities have some formally good publications, so from quartile Q1 for the first quartile in their list of journals, and that those universities are of comparable profiles. So we added some comprehensive universities, some federal universities, and some technical ones. Okay? And we got a group of 13 universities. Then we use the data from the Web of Science. By the way, what's the difference between HEC and Harvard? There are some minor differences in terms of faculty. Quality, blah, 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 it doesn't work. There's a main difference between HEC faculty and Harvard faculty. Among HEC faculty, everybody knows what Web of Science and Scopus is. In Harvard, nobody heard about those databases. So if you approach a person from, say, Harvard University Economic Department and said, how many publications in Q1 do you have? The person will say, what? What's a Q1 is? So that's the main difference. So we might use two competitive databases, Web of Science and Scopus. And we decided to use Web of Science because it's more selective and includes less fake and low quality journals which are growing now as mushrooms. That's why we focus on Web of Science. And we use two types of indicators. First, we use all articles and reviews for some period of time from Web of Science core collection, excluding what is called emergent sources citation index. Because formally, it's in the core, but in reality, the quality of the journals is substantially less. That's why we use this type of indicators. And we also use a subsample subpopulation of these articles, those who are indexed in the first quartile of the quality. Of course, you might say that it's not very good index, but at least it's some way to measure quality. And we also use data from the Ministry of Education and Science, the data about number of scientific staff at each university, and also data about R&D. So our approach was try to use those data which could be verified. So we didn't use data on publications which were self-reporting, because universities might cheat about that, but we use data directly from this statistical depository. So if you look on the treatment group, you will see the number of publications per capita, and that's the beginning of the project. You will see that there is a growing trend in publication, especially starting from 2013. Okay, but also there is a growth in the number of publications per capita in the control group as well. It's not that big, but still there is some growth, and you can even notice that. Why there is a growth? Mostly because in 2012, 2013, universities started to be evaluated by the ministry regardless of their status on how many publications they have per capita. So now that's an important indicator of efficiency regardless whether you are in the program or not. So universities try to publish that. So, which means that there is a growth in both basically groups. We also looked on the number of publications in the first quartile. Again, it's not the perfect measure of the quality, but still there is something here. And you can see that in the treatment group, there is a growth in the number of, say, good quality publications. And for the control group, even if there is some growth, you don't see that immediately on the picture, right? And in some cases, you can even see the decline of the quality. And why there is a decline? That's easy, because universities are pushed to provide numbers, aggregate numbers, and nobody cares about quality in terms of ministry reporting. Unlike here, you also need to report some quality growth, at least indirectly. Here, you just need to report some numbers. That's it. Okay? So, and also, you can see here that the percentage of Q1 and Q4, the best and worst publications, for treatment group. And you can see here that for the control group, what we see here, that for control group, for the treatment group, yeah, for the treatment group, there is a growth in high quality publications and decline in the, say, low quality publications. But let's look on the treatment group. For the control group, exactly. And for the control group, you can see that the share of low quality publications is basically huge. What does it mean that the publication is in Q4 journal? It basically means that nobody actually reads that. Nobody cites that, at least occasionally. Why? Because position in quartile actually correlates with citations. In Q4 journals, the means value of citation is 0. Median number of citations is 0. That's important, which means that the 2/3 of their output is actually goes exactly to the recycle bin. Not even recycle, but trash bin, okay? So, so for our empirical model, we try to use very simple intuition. We have a control group and treatment group, and each group exhibits some growth. Okay? And in this program, there was the external treatment, external shock, and here we try to estimate the program effect. Okay? So we try to delineate their whole growth and that growth which is attributed to this program. Okay? So the question is that do participants of 5 top 100 programs outperform control group trend? And how it looks like. So for that we estimate 2 models. We estimate first mixed effect model with uncorrelated random effect. And also we estimate a model with correlated random effects that allows us to see the correlation between individual trends. So each university has some individual trend. We try to take into account that there is a correlation between these kind of trends. Okay? What we get here, first, there's the estimation. John normally says, you can't see that but I hope that you can see that. Okay? Here, first 2 columns run this model for both control group and treatment group, and the 3rd and 4th just for treatment group. And you can see here that, for example, this coefficient means that in the year 2014, the universities which were in the treatment group, those which were participants of 500 program, outperformed the general trend for 0.12. Okay, and it also means that it outperforms the own trend for 28%. And here for 2015, the growth is even bigger, which is 26% and 28%. Okay, so it's like growing. And then we estimated basically correlated effects, model with correlated random effects, which take into account that individual trends of universities might be correlated. And we also get the substantial effect of being in the program. And you can see here that we included the funding of R&D for the universities. And basically we got that it's not significant. And some later regressions that we got some significance, but basically, just speaking between us, I don't believe those numbers. Of course, universities report financial numbers, but being a part of university management team, I know how those data are reported. It doesn't mean that we cheat. We don't. We report quite honestly, but the problem is that there is no exact methodology what and how should be counted. That's why, as a researcher, being a university administrator as well, I don't believe financial data reported by the university. That's a problem. But I might not say that. So again, we calculated the same for publication per person. Then we also look on their publication in Q1, and you also get anticipated results for number of publications in Q1, and here as well. So some findings at that point. Just to summarize up to this point, First, what we get is that after joining the project of 5 top 100, universities increase their publication activity. So they overcome both general trend and also their own publication trend, which could be extrapolated for the absence of the program, okay? And there's also an increase of publications per scientific staff, both in the general population journals and also for high quality journals. But if, again, you might ask me that you might say that one of the problematic points here is how we deal with scientific stuff. Because what universities are now doing, they're trying to play with the number of faculty on the board, okay? That's very easy. You teach 100 hours as a faculty. We say, okay, now the amount of hours you should teach is 200. You don't want to do 200. You just stay as a half of the faculty on the board. So your publications are counted with, not with half, but 2, because you being calculated as a half produce the same number of publications, okay? That's how you can increase the number of publications, decreasing the scientific staff number. And you can easily set in the trends of the scientific staff, okay? But there are some further questions which I would be happy to discuss with you. First, there is a general question about how this publication trend would change in the future. And you might say that it's not good to look on the immediate consequences of the program because the program just started. Yes and no. Yes, because of course, in the long term, there might be different pattern. But yes, but no, because this program, as I said, is very short-term oriented. And even in the first 3 years, you can see the considerable consequences, okay? But what might be important is to look on the different disciplines and different quality segments. Because in different disciplines, the trend might be different. And I'll give you an example why it might be so. Also, I think that all of us might be interested about what is the real impact of key performance indicator design. For example, we all know, we don't know anymore about Kazan, but still we know that about some other universities, there is a huge jump in fake journal in the recent years. And we might look whether isn't an important part of the university strategies to become excellent university, okay? We might look at that. And if you look on the number of publications, you might see that in the whole range of publications, there are some special publications. For example, if you look on HEC data, half of the HEC publication citations come from one person. Can you imagine that? Just, we have thousands of citations every year, and half of those citations come from one person, which is, of course, really important for our reporting, because otherwise it would be with much lower number of publications. Why is that? Because this person is a part of important biomedicine collaboration. And he produces 200 publications per year, which is good. But what is more important, he produces hundreds of citations. What does it mean for HEC? For HEC, it means that we are not lucky, because in many other universities, which have strong physics department, a lot of people are parts of, say, Large Hadron Collider collaborations. This collaboration, we all know that they found Higgs boson a few years ago, and there's a huge outflow of publications because of that. And exactly because of that, MIFI Institute, Moscow Physical Technical Institute, which was lucky to have one person in this collaboration, got a huge number of publication citations. Because the rule of the collaboration is that all people who are part of one collaboration, they all sign all papers. Okay, nice, right? And there are 100 collaborations coming out every year, which means that if you want to, for example, analyze a citations impact, you should take out all publications with large number of co-authors. Because in those publications, the number of co-authors could be 400, 5,000. A lot of people are working, okay? So that's why we did our robustness check for previous calculations for the number of publications limited to with a limited number of authors. We took number of authors below 10 to exclude them. But if you just calculate that without thinking about that, you are in trouble, okay? And just for you to think if somebody is interested in this kind of research, I just want to promote the idea of using bibliometric data for your research and productivity. Why is that? Why is this data great? Because for each publication, we know authors, okay? We know set affiliations. What does it mean? That for each author, we know all places where this person works right now. So we know countries and we know organizations. You also know discipline, and you might know keywords and everything you want to, and you also know citations. So there's a huge number of ideas you might exploit if you use this kind of data. A couple of slides basically to demonstrate what you might think about this further. First, as I said, disciplines are different. If you look on publications in first quartile and last quartile for control group and treatment group, for papers in technical sciences and physics and mathematics, you can see there is in both groups, there is general positive trend in the growth of those publications. Those percentage is their growth, okay? And you can see that the trends are different for control group and treatment group. But if you write down the same numbers, calculate the same numbers for social sciences, life sciences, and humanities, there is no basically difference between control group and treatment group. And also the share of publications in this type of disciplines is much lower. So the whole game is made by people in physics, mathematical, technical sciences, etc. Okay? Also, the graph, which is the most simple one, but I find it probably the most important one, just 2 lines. But there's the papers with single affiliation. If you look on the general trend, comparing countries, etc., you will see that the number of papers with joint affiliation is growing. Why is that? Because many people who do really good research cooperate across institutions and across countries. And if paper has a single affiliation, it's quite often this paper, not every time, but quite often this paper is written for low quality journal or even for fake journals. If you look on the same number of single affiliation papers in the fake journals, you will see that people actually quite often write fake publications just one person. Why? Because like to cheat, you don't need any co-authors. You just need any co-authors to do something good, to produce rubbish. You don't need anybody, okay? That's why I think that this graph might be a start of interesting story about our quality of publications and cooperation, and we can do that with our data. And finally, here is what I just mentioned, is the percentage of international collaboration for 5 top 100 universities, which are red columns, and control group. You can see here that basically since 2013, there is no substantial growth for the international collaboration for control group universities. But there is such a growth in the treatment group, which we might interpret, again, that's the issue to be discussed, we might interpret as an issue of visibility, which is an important idea for the whole program. Our universities, we might say, become more visible and more included in the global academic community. On this major note, I would finish my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria, for this very interesting presentation. I have a question about the evaluation of this excellence program. You're right saying that it is relevant to start evaluating it since the very beginning. But what really is the goal of this kind of program is to have a persistent increase in the quality of this university and so on and so forth. So in this slide, I would like to see in this evaluation in the papers something like something related to the work among peers in the different discipline. If this kind of funds, this kind of incentives from the excellence program were able to increase cooperation, because we all know that at this time to be in an international relevant research area and producing international relevant research area, you need to be in contact with people.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's a very important question. And many people actually are discussing this kind of issue, are saying, we're going to tell you an alternative story. An alternative story would go like that. It's not about actually universities writing better papers, producing more outputs, etc. That's because universities trying to cooperate in different forms with Institute of Academy of Science around them. Say in Novosibirsk, Krasnoyarsk, Tomsk, Moscow, St. Petersburg, there is not only universities, but very strong institutions of academic of sciences. And what universities do, they just take those people formally or informally, substantially, and try to cooperate with them, actually adding more affiliations to the output. And there is this kind of cooperation. And of course, there might be cooperation between peers, like within one organization and cross organization. That we are basically trying to do right now. We're trying to build networks to see how cooperation evolve over time, and if there are any difference in patterns of network change for treatment group and control group. And is this external research output of Institution of Academy of Science really important in this kind of university research output?
Masha, first, thanks a lot. That's a really great presentation. I think you did a great job. I was wondering if anybody has proposed to change the rules by creating a new class of elite teaching colleges. So you don't have this tradition in Russia, but it would seem to me that especially in the regions, if you could create colleges where the judgment is based upon the number admitted to, say, elite Russian universities or abroad, and you don't expect them to be the best in Russia, but it leads proper incentives for regional university, right? So you tell this university, we don't care, you can do research if you want, but we'll not judge you on that. It's all about how many good students you produce, and we'll judge that objectively by admission to top schools or admission to graduate programs abroad, etc.
That's an important issue. And as far as I know, the ministry and the government many times discuss this idea of creating a teaching excellence program. But so far, it's not supported because of several reasons. First, for bureaucratic reasons, you need to see results very fast and very clear. For teaching excellence, that's hard to do. Second, some years ago, government, like a couple of years ago, government started what was called projects of опорные вузы, kind of, I don't know how to translate that into English. I don't think this word could be properly translated, but it's kind of those institutions that are going to be important for the region because they provide good graduates for the region. And there is a great start for this program, and universities got some money for that. But for the second year, their government ran out of money, and they say, okay, you have your plans, you should fulfill them with no money. And the whole idea was kind of compromised. That's why we don't have this program yet, but many people are saying that's really important.
Thank you. I used to work for the HSC 5 years ago, so now I'm an Exeter. And when I moved from the HSC to Exeter, one of the things that was quite surprising for me was how similar the institutions are, right? Both are quite ambitious, both universities, both are vertically mobile. And another thing that is similar is how centralized the decision-making process is in both institutions. So both at the HSC and in Exeter, you would have quite a lot of, many decisions are taken at the very top level, top management level, and there is not so much autonomy at the departmental level, or even the levels of what is colleges in Exeter, as faculties at the HSC. Now, I don't think it's random coincidence. It's basically, well, you know better, but I think it's a consequence of exactly this. Being an ambitious and mobile university, you need to be able to make decisions quickly. And if you kind of delegate everything to the departmental level, anyone who's ever been at the departmental meeting knows that these meetings are not able to make any kind of decisions, right? So you would have chaos if you do this, right? And at the same logic in Exeter. It doesn't have to be like this because there are universities that don't do this. For example, Oxford is very decentralized, everything at the college level, and they make decisions at the college level. And I don't know much about the Moscow State, but my guess would be that it is quite decentralized too. Now, that's all fine, but there are some unintended consequences of this. And one of the unintended consequences of this, I believe in both places, that it alienates people, it alienates staff. Because when you work at the department, when you're at the department, we all, you know, we all want to think about ourselves as people who want to make decisions. We have opinions, and we think we know better, and sometimes we do know better. And when you have all those decisions made up there, and that's channeled back to you, you kind of don't like it, right? And you become alienated, you don't report it back to the top management because what's the point? You don't want to, you know, to jeopardize your position at the university and it doesn't lead anywhere. And then you kind of start ignoring this stuff, right? Or you start faking it. And the most important thing about universities is people, right? You can create any kind of incentives. If you don't have the right kind of people who can produce those papers are not going to be produced, or you're going to get fake journals, fake papers, whatever, right? Either they can do this or can't do this. So I was just wondering what you, as both a researcher and administrator, what do you think about this? Is there any kind of solution about this? Because I understand why the centralized decision making is necessary, but I also understand the unintended consequences. Is there any kind of balance that can solve the problem?
Thanks, Alexei. I think that you're really nicely, correctly describes there what I consider the main dilemma for ambitious university. Because for comfort, research, excellence in that, you need stability. And for improving, you need basically centralized decisions. And I don't think there is a recipe with the right mixture of how to do that. And for example, HEC always try to balance. And quite often in the central management team, we discuss our current problems, and probably what you just said is the most important problem we are discussing. To what extent we can delegate decisions, and to what extent we should try to push something through people. And we don't have any clear solution for that. But what we did last year, we took data on the governance style, the survey monitoring of economics of educational organization, right? There is faculty survey, which asks people about their governance style in the university. If you take part in the decisions, how decisions are communicated to you, what you know about decisions, do you feel you are part of decision-making process, etc. And we try to see the correlation between type of the university and the style of decision-making. Because general theory suggests that in good research university, there is a shared governance, and everybody takes part in the decisions, etc. But what we got is exactly what you are saying, that in the flagship universities of the country, 5 top 100 research universities, we have a centralized style of decisions, and in the regional relaxed universities, there is more relaxed style of their decision making. That's exactly what you're saying. But thanks for framing that.
Thank you for your presentation. But could you clarify again for me why you started your presentation that there is no problem with control group and that your results are not so much biased? I'm pretty sure that they are still, your decision about participation in this program are determined by characteristics of your university, and that universities which did not participate in this program and that they've got the same level of papers and dynamic in previous periods does not solve the problem with biased results, I suppose. Why do you ignore the determination of participation in a program with characteristics of universities?
But what would be the alternative?
I have already said it but, in a previous lecture of your students, maybe, that there are some methods which could solve the problem of determinations like double robustness check and other applied econometrical models. I could give you a contact of one professor who solves them, and I'm pretty sure that your research could be better if you solve the problem with biased data.
Two issues. First, in our treatment group, we haven't included the second wave of university admitted to the program because of different reasons. But among our control group, 5 of 13 universities were selected to be participants for their second wave of 5 top 100 project, which means that we probably made a good pickup because those universities were considered by the ministry as the proper ones to be included in the program later. And those universities are very comparable in those characteristics with the rest of the group. You might ask how you run all your regressions considering these universities are part of the treatment group, but they got some extra money, etc. But since we do calculations for 2015, and those universities got their money at the very end of 2015, we consider that there is no any influence of their information about inclusion in the program on their performance. That's what we do. But the second issue, I might probably say that you are right and we should think about fancy econometric techniques, etc., to build a control group. But when you just like take a list of several hundred universities, and for each university you see a lot of characteristics, you might think about different kind of methods. But since you know what kind of data you are digging in, it's really hard, it's really hard to apply something formal when you know that it doesn't give you your proper result. Okay? I was telling that I have time for 1 question, 2 questions. I can't choose, so those who has microphone has the right.
Okay,
Alexei.
thank you.
But I will be happy to answer your questions.
In your introduction, you have mentioned a very interesting topic. There is spillover effects that occur due to excellence initiative for the whole higher education system. Could you please just mention some of these effects in the context of Russian excellence initiative and how it is possible to measure it, maybe just in theory?
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks for your question. That's exactly what our next paper is going to be about. We try to measure the side effect of excellence initiative on the rest of their, not on the control group, but on the rest of their sector. Why is that? I will just mention two potential effects. First, students might migrate to better universities. If they migrate to better universities, then other universities end up with worse student body. Also, faculty might also think about migrating to better universities. And those universities who lose faculty, they end up in like closing within each other. That's why looking on the dynamic of students' quality, we might make some reasoning, and also looking on the patterns of faculty migration through the analysis of affiliations, and also through the patterns of networks between different universities, you might find these potential spillover effects. And we already get some preliminary results. There is a kind of mixed evidence on those kind of effects. So thank you very much, and I'll be happy to answer questions.